Oh, okay. That's the chair.
Okay, as the chair of the cluster.
No,
As
yeah.
the chair of the cluster.
I would consider myself as the chair of this cluster. So, good morning, everyone. Good morning. Yeah. I actually prepared some notes for these opening remarks, but I guess the first thing I have to greet and welcome Markus and Luisa. Thank you very much for coming and willing us to collaborate with us. Uh, we can just start with this lecture this morning and followed by a discussion later on. So you guys come actually in the right times. You know the weather is very good. Yeah, I would have the weather is very good and Depok today is really welcome with this shining morning. And we have a cluster on our Department of Anthropology called Tradition and Indigeneity, because we believe that actually heritage is not just a monument object or just something that we can always come and collect. Yeah? But heritage is life. One of the key that we believe is that heritage is life. It has a history. It is also about practices, tradition, memories, and also structure. So I would like to see this opportunity as a kind of introduction of our clusters. Yeah. And anthropology gives a very special lens to understand this, the dynamic of the object, quote unquote object, as a living thing. It is about how we not just see particular object, but how the object already can also talk and say something to us about the past. And what we believe is that the past is actually reflective of what our future would be. Yeah? And Indonesia, in particular, we are blessed with incredible cultural diversity. But as I studying a lot about these tradition, for me, it's like that the state and community have a very wide gap. Let's say a gap. Well, the community always believe that the tradition, or say local culture practice, uh, should be based on their uh, 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 needs or their perspective. But for the state, uh, from time to time, it seems that they like have a kind of policy to manage or to control the dynamic or development of culture, so traditional culture. You see that during the first presidency of Indonesia, Soekarno, right after the independence, all the efforts of the government is focusing on how to build this kind of nationhood, so nationhood of Indonesia, because we really come from very various ethnic group. So what we call Indonesia actually should be built as a new thing at the time. So the first project, cultural project for Indonesia, is how to like develop a new identity in Indonesia as state, not just ethnic groups and some. Yeah. And today we really glad to have you, Markus and Lisa, to have more perspective on the methodological aspect, for example. Yeah. Since the talk will focusing on how the archive-based study can be done as an anthropologist. So I really like to hear your lecture. And I also welcome Luisa who conduct your research in Maluku. This is a great place. Eger actually has conducted his research there. And I believe that for some reason, Maluku is really rich of this so-called heritage. Um, 5 years ago, I've been doing research in Taiwan, indigenous Taiwan, and they said that actually they are part of Austronesian culture. So they try to differentiate themselves with the mainland China. We are not Han people, we have came from Austronesia. And to my surprise, some of their traditions, some of their practice, for example, rituals, the the style of the patient, the traditional patient, is really similar to the one we can found in Maluku. Even the bamboo dance, what do you call it? The bamboo dance, the dance it can also found there in Taiwan. So, and during the 15th century, Maluku is also considered to be the first region in Indonesia to receive Western influence. The time Spanish and Portuguese explorer came to Maluku after the Malacca. I think after Malacca. So welcome to Indonesia to Maluku. This you visit Maluku, and for the student, for the audience, for the participant, I would like to thank you and really appreciate for your interest in part and in joining our workshop. This is really our first time to join conduct this workshop as a cluster. But I think we will continue this collaboration in the future. Again, terima kasih, Duncan. Thank you very much, and we welcome Markus and Luisa to share your thoughts. Thank you very much. Selamat pagi.
Mas Aji, so we will also have another remark, probably just short remark before Magnus and Luisa start their talk.
Oh, another.
Maybe this is quite new for Luisa and Magnus. So this is a part of the most ceremonial aspect of an academic discussions at our university. So it's part of also acknowledge who are the one who also make this event possible. So we usually put an appreciation to that. But first of all, I thanks to the committee, Geger, to make this event happen today, to connect us with Magnus and Luisa here, and also connect us with the participants of the workshop in the afternoon. I'm really glad that we are can arrange this event workshop. I'm talking here now as a chair of the department to see the issues, the cross-cluster issues that really important. So this event not also important as part of the indigenous tradition and indigeneity cluster, but thanks Markus and Luisa to bring these topics to us also, because in other cluster we also try to develop the issues on the archive and anthropology. We are now trying to exploring the role of history and also try to reflect and explore the methodologically about ethnographically informed history and historically informed ethnography. So thanks, you are part of this initiative and we are looking forward to explore this one. And for all the participants, thanks for coming and to participate in the discussion. I'm looking forward for fruitful discussions in this morning and also in the afternoon. I'm looking forward to further discussions and collaborations with all of you. I think now I should end the opening remarks and I will send it back to Geger. Thanks everyone. Thank you, Mas Imam. So we will still have some kind of ceremony here now. Sorry, this is like
Rituals.
rituals in Indonesian about the big slide. So we will have Mas Aji. Could you please come here and hand over the souvenir? Magnus and Luisa.
I think first for you, Magnus. A small gift for you. You should stand up and appreciate this gift. No need to return. Thank you very much for coming. Yeah. There's another one for Lisa. You did it. Really? That's a clue. Yeah. Okay. Yep. And what next?
Okay, done. So
conversation.
I don't want to take the audience time further now, and I will hand the floor to Magnus. Magnus, the floor is yours.
Thank you. A second. If possible, I would prefer to speak without micro. Can I? Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
Belakang bisa dengar ya.
Zoom? Zoom is there?
Yes.
Micro
And the
is
Zoom.
Tapi Zoom-nya ya.
Yeah.
I think it's better
just have
to
the same
use
notes
that
and
one.
I'll tell you when to.
It's better with the Zoom. The Zoom is better.
Can I write it down somewhere? So, does this work? No.
Yeah, it's okay.
Yeah, okay. Thank you from our side to be here and to be warmly welcomed. We had already a warm welcome despite the rain. Luisa and me, we are from Munich University. We have a research project on a man called Markus Mailopu, who came from Seram and ended up in Cameroon through his way to Germany, and we'll tell that story. But we also signed in the course of this project an MOU with the Universitas Indonesia. We're very happy that that has been possible, and that means we are also seeking further collaboration. We are here, we are approachable. Please don't hesitate, we'll have the afternoon for that. Just let's share thoughts and get into contact on that. Yeah? So that was the formal part. I'll take over a first introduction. Luisa will introduce the online archive as such, which is mainly has been her work, and I will conclude with a few remarks on anthropology of heritage as Giga asked me to do so. I'm a bit afraid I won't tell you much new. I've read your abstracts and I'm quite impressed. That's really solid work and it's innovative, it's lively, so I think we'll have some promising debate. Next slide, please. First slide. So, how did we come here? It starts with an anecdote. We have a university archive, and we have the Institute of Social and Cultural Anthropology has its own, let's call it boxes, archived in the archive, literally boxes. And we had a student assistant whom we assigned to open these boxes and look what's inside, because we had very loose knowledge. And we found a diary from Markus Mailopu, a man from Seram, in our university archive. So that was the starting point, and we wanted to explore further. He came to Germany in the course of or after the second Freiburg Moluccan Expedition had been done, 1910 to 1912. It's called Freiburg because it started from there. Karl Deniger was the head of this expedition, geologist and paleontologist, and he was kind of associate professor at Freiburg University, not fixed position, so he still needed to do something for his career. He had been in the on Buru Island in 1967 and wanted to come back and with a bigger team. He was able to recruit Odo Deodatus Tauern, who is the, how do you call that, the irregular son of a German industrial and a nobleman, and a student from Munich, who was still a student at that time. There was Erwin Stresemann, who studied medical studies, science and zoology. He had a special interest in ornithology, and he took over the natural science part. Well, he was meant to take over that part. While Odo Tauern, trained in physics, took over geographical tasks, and also he was assigned to do ethnography. At the end, we'll say it becomes more complex. But Erwin Stresemann was at Munich University, and that's why we at Munich had some of these personal letters in our archive. Next slide. The so-called second Freiburg Moluccan expedition has somehow been widely forgotten. It left traces, and Luisa will come to that, but it's no longer very widely known in Germany, and less so, of course, we'll discuss on Mailopu. Karl Deninger dies very early in Second World War, First World War, sorry, in northern Italy. He was, all three of them can be, I think, understood as national conservative Germans. So it was somehow felt a national duty to go to war, and Karl Deninger died there. Ole Tauern, he died 10 years later having a sports accident, and he was a very passionate alpinist. He was climbing mountains, using modern technology at that time, filming so he was he did one of the earliest documentaries in German movie history. And so he was, of course, interested in Ceram's mountainous areas, and it had also a sportive aspect for him. So he also did not live very long, but he was able to publish Pataseo and Pata Lima, and through Giga I learned that it has been translated into Indonesian language and is available, and it's known. And it's somehow an early ethnographic book, while in Germany it's totally forgotten. No one remembers Tauern, and you really have to go to a library which has old books to find them. Stresemann finally lived long and happy, and he became famous, not in ethnography, not in linguistic studies, language studies, which he did together with Markus Mailopu, but as an ornithologist. And he could be called the most important German ornithologist in the 20th century, and he even was president of the International Ornithologist Committee, I think so, Association. Next slide, please. So, where did they start from? They came through Singapore, where they, to which they took a Lloyd's steamer. They explored some of the Malay Peninsula and finally ended in Surabaya. They had a plan, and this plan was to have their own kind of ship which could sail and had a steamer motor, and that plan didn't grow, it failed. So they had, even before reaching Maluku, they had to give up in Surabaya, on Bali's shores, I think, and they spent much time waiting for repair and for spare parts to arrive and be built in. So they had done, accidentally somehow, some explorative work among the Sakai and on Bali, on Java also, before the actual expedition reached Maluku, and they had to return back, so the time span shortened a bit. They reached Ambon then only in spring 1911, went soon or very quickly to Seram, and Tauern went on to Misul, while Deninger and Stresemann had some time, 3 months, on Buru Island. They collected professionally. In fact, more than 1,200 bird skins, which have been, of course, shot down wherever possible, without further asking. Butterflies, insects, even ants, all that has been brought to or shipped to Tring Natural History Museum in the UK, which were a fatherly friend and the most important ornithologist of the time. Internationally, Ernst Hartet was based. It was a private museum owned by Walter Rothschild. Mammals and reptiles they brought to Mainz, where they have been administered by Karl Deninger and colleagues, and botanical samples went to Basel in Switzerland to a professor whom they just met, I think in Singapore and later on again. So you see, they were very interested also in networking and making this expedition happen and transporting things back. And you can already imagine that they had huge boxes which they needed to transport, so they never could have done that alone. The Ethnographica are maybe among the most prominent reminders of that expedition, and they are dispersed in many museums, particularly in Germany: Berlin, Frankfurt, Dresden, Leipzig, Köln, Freiburg. In Munich, we just have text. This means personal letters. Yeah, I think so. What came out of that expedition academically? Thanks, you're faster than I am. Not that much, because Deninger and Town didn't live long, but Deninger published, or that was published posthumously, on geology of the region. He had an idea of tectonics and tectonic development, which I cannot fully explain because I'm not a geologist, but it was published in a marginal, very specific journal, so not much publicity beyond. Cowan presented in front of the German Association of Anthropologists. That was quite prominent, and he published Patasima and Catalima, while having also his notes on Sakai grammar and vocabulary published. But that's it. You have to really be interested in that matter to find it. Stresemann is the most, has done a remarkable publication history, because he became an ornithologist and he published loads of books and chapters and articles on ornithology, also of that region, but he also did language studies, and he did these with Markus Mailopu, whom he needed to teach him that language before he could have analytical thoughts on language development and grammar. So he actually published on that while being a full-time ornithologist already. And he developed also theoretical ideas on which became important for ornithology in the mid-20th century on the basis of his research in Maluku. That means, roughly summed up, at that time there was an ideal to, a positivist ideal to simply collect and to get a perfect collection mapping the world. Inspired by Darwinist thought, he already added a layer of, or an aspect of development, evolution. So the taxonomy couldn't be the last avant-garde of natural studies. Something had to go on, and that was not only, so collecting was no longer enough. And that's starting on the base of these collections done in Maluku. Maybe that is also, the whole expedition is also a bit forgotten. Stresemann's language studies, who knows about them, because a more famous expedition arrived a couple of decades later. Adolf Elegard Jensen was part of them, the Siram expedition. You might have heard, Inga is of course nodding. The Heimo Wele myth, which was prominently published, the Frobenius expedition from Frankfurt, and it had other means. It was more modern. It had also another theoretical outlook. So the so-called second Freiburg Moluccan expedition was somehow appeared to be a private enterprise and somehow also a test and experiment. Luisa, you'll tell me if I'm too long. Yeah? You'll shut me down. Okay. So that is usually how expeditions classically have been seen in German academic history. You have heroes, you have publications, an outcome, you have collections, you have museums showing these collections, you have presentations among academic colleagues, which at that time have been German and European at best. But there's another layer. I already mentioned that the members of the expedition needed a local crew, a local team. Classically, this is called informants, but it was not only informants. There were porters, you needed porters, you needed translators, you needed what is called in modern journalism fixers. In international journalism, that means intermediaries, people who knew where to go, people who could ask other people to provide information. So quite a diverse set of services which these expeditions needed. And we found out that, in fact, the region here, today's Indonesia and Maluku in particular, had already these types, or there were already these types of specialists available. And they, whenever their Europeans arrived, they offered their services, and there were intermediaries who then brought these together. They are, of course, forgotten in European academic history, but they were, without them, these expeditions couldn't happen. And so the first team was booked in Surabaya in the hotel through hotel staff telling them, I'll get you some people. And it turns out in the diaries, less so of course in academic publishing, but in the diaries, these local service people are very prominent, and parts of them also become friends, and they have, as they are somehow for weeks together in the Sierra Mountains, they develop quite a personal relationship. This is of course forgotten in the end. Markus Mailopu is the exception who brought us in that, but that's quite interesting. So Erwin Stresemann, still a young man of 20 years, a student still, he writes in his diary, also a quite fine Javanese had taken part in Elbert's Sunda expedition. So Johannes Elbert has been there previously, and he's one of them who knew the job already. As a plant collector, I soon discovered his ability to prepare birds, and must confess that he soon surpassed me, his master teacher in skill. He was joined by little Dalit Lula as his assistant. Where there was a need for a strong man, Dalit was in the right place. Barely 19 years old, so you see they have been age mates, young men just becoming kind of comrades. Though, of course, utterly hierarchical, that was never in question. He had an amazingly developed musculature, a young lad of athletic build and a loyal child's soul. Arwin, who had long been my constant hunting companion in Bali and knew his way around, I often owed the discovery of the hidden bird to his sharp eyes. Japar and Joman left us in Wahai as they were not up to the rigors of the foreign islands. So there was this kind of staff and personal commitments, and also they were of course employed and they were paid, is cleaned out of the formal reminders and the heritage of the expedition. What did they try to learn, and how did they try to learn? Of course, they brought back samples of different kinds. Three directions can roughly be differentiated: natural science, linguistic science, and ethnographic description. I don't call it science, while they might have used that term. For natural science, of course, they brought back rock samples. Why? It's colonial times, so modernizing, industrializing Europe needed industrially usable resources from the peripheries of Europe. That meant regions which had to be colonized or were already colonized. So exploitation, of course. And that was also how Denier tried to sell his expedition, to some extent. I will find something which is usable. Fauna and flora were, in a way, more, at that time, more of fundamental scientific interest, but there is more to it. So why that interest in in birds. Diana Loche has worked on that, and it has to do with the exotic colors of birds attracting also signs, making signs colorful, being attracted also to something exotic which can be brought home and which has to be killed, of course, before. So one of the major tasks of the local staff was taxidermy. Shoot birds, kill them, and stuff them. And how did they do that? The collection served to have samples and to compare these samples and to form categories and families and in a way already also descent. So filling up boxes of positivist academic thought. That was the fundamental academic interest, but of course these were relatively young men, and still a student, they did that for career reasons. Having such a collection would make you somehow someone in European academia. The linguistic studies were more maybe a first side effect. They were studying Malay during their ship travel, and they became quite fluent. And also they had an idea of that language can be mapped like natural science. You have to have an idea of grammar, you need a basic vocabulary, and then this is the key to language. It's less spoken language, it's more the scientific or the categorical system behind your stuff. But they were quite fluent other than me. Finally, ethnographic description. Of course, that was in the program from the beginning, but I think personally that it was more a bycatch. There were people in the region you wanted to study, and these people were somehow different, exoticized, special. They needed to also to be explored in a way, but they would also vanish during colonial, or be transformed during colonial transformation and change. So it was a kind of salvage ethnography developed out of that, and following an ideal of holism, studying each and everything. You see that also in the examples finally stand for something more general, but they might have seen just one dance and one wedding and one, by accident maybe even. But of course this was the base to become an expert on that. Of course, headhunting and killing and fighting and war, that was somehow also very of great interest for these three young German men, belonging somehow to a well-off privileged German national conservative milieu. So there was an ideal of militarism also in that days Germany. And you see that in the choice of topics. Next slide. So natural science is clearly meant to be, or follows an empiricist, positivist approach. Linguistic studies might be in between, and ethnography, I think, is more phenomenological in the way they try to understand. Of course, they had this idea that they can take over systematic thinking from natural sciences, put it onto people, but people were not rock samples or plants or birds. So pragmatically, they had to also adjust, and only afterwards it looked like people follow systems. So I think their approach broke there even. Next slide. Just to look at two quotes from Tauen on his writing in Seram, and Deniger in Tauen and Schlesmann in one of their final reports. Tauen writes, the further one travels from west to east, the lower the Alfours are in culture, which is evident not only in their customs, but also in their entire way of life and their manual skills. Household utensils become simpler and fewer in number, and the highly developed ornamentation in Western ceramics disappears completely in Eastern ceramics. With their peculiar nature, they quickly lose their resilience and disappear among the coastal population. As sad as it is, I fear that in a short time there will be no trace left of the Alfours. So you see two things: expected change through colonial transformation, which means modernization also in European perspective. There is no way out. You see, that you might feel sorry, but still this will gonna happen. Second, hierarchical understanding of culture, which refers to Johann Gottfried Herder's concept of culture, which somehow is equal to each other. One culture and another culture may differ, but they are in a way the same, or they have the same value. But if you put these cultures on a global scale, you get clear hierarchies. And you can read from ceramics the standard position of certain cultures. And these were about to be losing. So you have also an idea of an origin there. So these are original Alfur cultures in the interior Sierra, not at the coastline, where it is Muslim and connected to regional trades in the century, but inside there is a real original culture, therefore we have to map it. But how did they get there and what is original? Dehninger, Town and Stesman in the report, they stand quite openly. The fact that we were unexpectedly successful here in Middle Sierra is primarily due to the great perseverance with which the Dutch military made this area accessible. So we found an area virtually unknown from a scientific point of view, which might not be true, by the way, and with the most favorable working conditions for us. Everywhere we found paths in an unusually good condition. There were almost everywhere houses built for military patrols and villages. We did not have the slightest difficulties with the population, which used to be so shy and not without danger, as the military had accustomed them to deal with Europeans. So they are placing themselves, of course, in a colonial situation, although as German citizens, they had to apply for permits to go there and do their research. And my idea is that they also offered services, for example, mapping Middle Sierra, which was not properly mapped at that time, contributing to knowledge, but the Dutch military a few years before started to pacify, that means violently penetrate inner Sierra. Next slide. So, how did we get there? Back to the starting point, Mailopu appears in a diary which we found in the archive of Munich University. We took it as a motivating find, as something which has to be somehow unpacked by us, but which we also want to make available as stories, as an opportunity to engage, also to discuss. We're also here to somehow present the case and also to somehow test or initiate if this is of any interest for further research and what can be done about that. Because it's not owned by us, although the letters are in Munich University archive. So what we try to do is also to, our third colleague Philip calls this reactivation, to make it accessible, to make it useful, good food for thought. And we had seminars on that, we're discussing, we try to really take it into our hands and get it out of that forgotten state into making it an academic issue again. And that's what Luisa will present in detail.
All right. Thank you, and hello from my side. Is this? Yeah, it's okay. Yeah, I'm very glad to be here. I'm a bit nervous, but I'm sure that will go away in a second. So thank you, Magnus, for introducing the project and the expedition. And I would like to, now I will work with the technical side, to just move through the archive a bit, because this is what it's there for. So I didn't prepare any slides, because this is what we want to talk about. Yes, as Magnus has mentioned, we have these collections in our university archive, and there were, for me at least, when I joined the project, when the archive was looked at, and there was a student assistant who had prepared and said, well, this is what we have. And then we were to decide, okay, what do we do now? Do we do an exhibition there? How do we work with this? And the two things that I found difficult or interesting is that from the material that we found, there were two starting points from which to move out and search for more, and that was the expedition that Magnus has introduced. So who were the people? What did they publish? What's about the expedition? And then also Markus Mailopu. So we have also a biographical approach in this context, because this Magnus talked about the other three, of course. There's still, you can find Wikipedia articles about them, even though they're not that known, but Markus Mailopu not. So this is what interested us most in this. So these were, starting with these two focus points, I went to other archives and looked where do I find more about the expedition and Markus Mailopu. And I was very positively surprised to find a lot. And Magnus has already mentioned there's in total 12 different institutions in Germany that carry material in whatever form. There's also, as Magnus said, private letters, diary notes, official reports, mainly in our archive. There's glass plates, they took a lot of images. Tawan took especially a lot of photographs that can be found. We have maps, then personal items, ethnographic items, plant specimens, stuffed birds, and there are also even sound recordings. And there should be a film also, which I haven't found, but there was a film actually made by Tawan also. I'm still trying to, we have a colleague who's also doing research on film history. I hope that at some point we'll find it. I'm sure it's on some attic. But the sound recordings we were actually able to retrieve also. And this is also one of the reasons why I'm here and why I'm very happy that I can go to Ambon and talk to the colleagues there, because of course we don't know what's in these sound recordings. Are we okay to listen to them? Should we maybe not listen to them? Is this maybe sacred ones in there? So this is not on our archive yet, and I'm sure that there might be some that we cannot publish, but I hope it's in the ethnographic collection in Berlin also. They have a photographic collection that we will be able to publish some. So this will also, it's a constant work in progress, so the archive is constantly growing. I want to first ask the question, why an archive? Because there is a lot of research that has been done on the archive, also the violence that our archives and archival categorization imposes on culture, on people, on life. Do we need to, to do that again? Should we perpetuate that? And we decided to create a digital archive for two reasons. First, to use it as a tool for our own research, to create a hub where everything can be collected so that it somehow becomes organized, because it's so much you cannot, I cannot keep it in my drawer, although that's also full, but a digital archive is more suitable for that. And also, as Magnus has mentioned, to provide access so that not us can view it, but everyone can, as far as possible, of course, because it's not our material, it's from different universities or different museums. And not only to provide an archive, but to use a platform that makes it possible also to work with this material, to rearrange it, to bring it together, to juxtapose, to make digital exhibitions, which I will come to also later. And this is why we used Omeka Classic, which is what this is built on. I don't know if you know Omeka Classic. It's an open access publishing platform. It's not that common in Germany, actually. And it's specially made to share digital collections, to create exhibitions. And what is very helpful in our case is that it's run also on our university server, so everyone can just download it, and every institution, we need a server for that also. We luckily had a student assistant who did the setup, because I'm not a computer expert. I could do some, but not that much. But it's now installed on our university archive, so we can also ensure that it's secure, that it won't be hacked, that everything is safe, and if things need to be taken down, that this is also possible. But of course, it's, as I said, it's open open source also. So the good thing is that it's free for everyone to use. You can build with it if things need to be changed, or you think, oh, we might need a different setup, then you can do that. But if something hasn't been done yet, then it's not there. And then, of course, you have restraints, or you're restricted to what this platform offers, which at the beginning seemed like a problem, but we decided to be pragmatic with it, because the consequence of rethinking this is that nothing happens, and this is not what our goal was. So we tried to work with what we have, and one example, if you could scroll down just a tiny bit, yeah, further down, so we see the collections a bit further. Yeah, great, perfect. So Omeka is based on collections, so it's an item-based platform. And usually the collections that they expect you to enter is the collections from the different institutions. So we would have the collection of the University Archive, the collection of the Ethnographic Museum in Frankfurt, etc. But it is already dispersed like that. The material is already spread out, and it would not be of much use if we just redid that dispersion, but online. So we asked ourselves the question, what categories come from the material that actually help us understand the expedition and help us understand the story? And what came out are documents, artifacts, photographs, maps. These are the four until now. I told you there might also be the sound recordings, or maybe even film at some point. But these were the four most prominent media forms that we found in the archive, and also people. Now, people are of course not found as such in the archive, and it could be argued also that this is a weird decision, but we decided to put the people here because what we want to focus on is the relationships that actually made this expedition possible. So the relationships that are within all this material that can be found. And it's not, in the end, of course, we find photographs and letters and paper and other forms of material, but it was people that made all this happen. And also to be like more user-friendly or visitor-friendly, because this is supposed to be viewed by others, we decided to put people in there to give them a prominent position and make sure this is also the focus that we want to give. So maybe now we can start just looking in it. If you could click on artifacts, then we get an overview of the artifacts that are currently in the collection. And you already see one that has not been mentioned yet, but that definitely further spurred our interest. You could click on the first one, maybe please, the bust of Markus Mailopu. So latest when this came to our attention, it was clear that something is going on here that we should do research about. And this bust is in the Museum of Natural History, actually, in Berlin. And Erwin Stresemann actually had it on his desk. So this is one of the items that I was also able to view actually and go to Berlin. And it's not before there was a small blog done about it, so you could find those images online, but not more about really the metadata information. And this is one reason why we actually decided also why I'm just trying to go along the lines why is an archive here useful, because it also allowed us and the institutions to collect metadata that was known by some people, and you find some information here and there, but it's not all written together. You cannot find it in one point. And for the first time now, this is the case for a lot of items. This is just one example. All these items can be drawn together and found in one place, and it is now our archive. So if you scroll down, I don't know if there's, just to give you an example, it's just the classic, for those who know, it's the Dublin core metadata set that we use, which is the most common one that also many big museums use, so it's also easy to interchange and connect to other museums. So there will soon be a larger amount of items come from Frankfurt University, and it will be quite easy because they use the same metadata set to just import the information. Another one that I would like to look at, if you could scroll up again or go back to the main page, then we would delve into the further back one more to the documents. It's the first one up. Yes. So this is just an overview. You see there the two diaries. If you could click on that first one. So these were the famous, or these are the famous diaries that have been found in the archive. Maybe you can click on one of those. See a bit. We try to downsize the image size, but it's still a bit difficult. So here you can see very well, this is now Alfugu, not Palohi, but there's always two sides. So one side is always in Malayu, and the other side is the same text in Palohi or Alfugu in this case. And this is how Erwin Stresemann did his linguistic studies then. So because he knew Malayu, he tried to understand the Palohi or Alfugu, and there's actually some communication also between them. Oh, well, what do you mean here? And then Markus Mailopu answers, well, this is what I meant. And these are the diaries that are in our in our archive. If you minimize the image again, but if you scroll further down, yes, perfect. Another good thing about the digital archive is that we can actually directly connect various items, or in this case also connect the research that has been done in our project. If you click on the translation, but within, this one, the translation, there, there's a link you can click on. So, yes, within our project, the translation of the Malay part has been done, so the Malay parts are all translated. And as this is also a document now that is connected to the expedition, it's only fair enough to also include it in this archive. And this is what I mean by taking up the archive and kind of working it in a way that is useful for us. We don't have to restrain and say, well, this is not a historical document, so we don't have to include it. Why? We can include it. It adds to the history. It is part now of the history of this expedition. We have now translated it, so it goes into the archive. And the way we did it, because the Palohi and Alfugu was not possible to translate at the time, I think Palohi will be very difficult. Maybe there's a colleague in Ambon who might be interested in working on that. But at least, I don't know, probably some of you can also, it's the old spelling also, but I think for Indonesians it could be fairly easy to, if you know Bahasa well, you could read it, but of course in German you cannot. So this is the Malay part and the translation on the other side. So if you're interested, you're very welcome to click in later and read it. It's quite remarkable actually what Mailopu wrote. And one last item that I wanted to show is people we need something by Tawan now. If you could click on this. So this is actually a notebook by Olu Tawan that Markus has mentioned. So it seems that Tawan was really interested, or he had a very visual approach. So he did photographs, the images, and what he also did was drawing. So he was interested in the patterns that can be found on sago tongues, for example, or in small weavings. So he drew these patterns, and there are actually in the archive a few of the items that the patterns he drew there. So the notebook is in Munich, and the actual, physical objects are in Cologne or in Frankfurt. And through the archive, we can reconnect that and also see how Tawan actually made sense of what he saw and how he works on field. If it's dispersed like that, it wasn't visible before. So this is something that we were also able to do through the archive. And maybe one last time, because there's one thing we could go back to the artifacts. Yes. This is one of the sago tongues, for example. And if we scroll down here, for example, this is in, at the Klassi Museum in Leipzig. They also have a few things. And if we scroll further down, we added one category at the end. And this is the curatorial notes. So this is something where it's really clear this is not set metadata facts that come from the museum, but this is our curatorial work or our comments, so to say. And in this case, for example, we use the curatorial notes to link directly to the notebook that I just showed you. So on page 3 and number 2 is the same pattern that we can see on this Saroton. So also for colleagues in the museums, this is very useful to get to know further the collection that they actually have. So this has been so far quite a win-win situation for the museums also and for us as researchers, and I hope also I will find out, or we can discuss that, for colleagues or people in Mailopu that are interested or here in this history. And apart from having all these collections, what is most interesting, or what is, I think, most rewarding about the archive is if you scroll up that we can build exhibitions, as I said, digital exhibition. It always sounds grand, of course, in the end you have pages on the web, on the internet, so it can't be like the flamboyant exhibition that you would have in real life, of course. And if you click on the 3, exactly, you have exhibits. And so far there are 2 exhibits. First one we had for a couple of times is the expedition routes. There you can see what Magnus has already mapped before. You can just have a quick look maybe in it. The routes that they took in general, and then Stresemann-Linia and Tauern, because they split up. Magnus did mention that they had a really bad argument at some point. So Tauern was very hard to work with apparently, so they split and he went his own way. And this is, for example, just to scroll through and see where they went in general, what the general route was. And then also Stresemann-Linia, Tauern, and Mailopu, who joined them on Google, as Magnus has said. So this one has been online quite a while for those who are more interested. Also for, I think it's quite valuable to understand the history of expeditions as such. Also what was done, the way it was done. Also coming back to the relationships, the problems that occur. Everyone is just, people are people, and things go wrong. People have arguments, and things are sometimes different than they seem. But what I wanted to show you is the last one, and then I'm closing with actually just of today we published this exhibition, so it was just in time for this event. And this is an exhibition where we managed to just put all together all the information that we have on Markus Mailopu so far. It is called the Mailopu Archive for a reason, and we have been able to actually, I was a bit surprised myself, to be honest, because not so much is known, but through his own writing, through letters and official reports. After all, there's quite a lot that you can find out. I hope to find out more maybe in Ambon also, in the archives there. I'm sure there will be some more information, especially on his early years when he grew up in Ceram. Maybe you could just click on the first, the early years in Ceram. So this is more focused on his own diaries and the manuscripts, and what might be interesting for later, if you could scroll down. I think the presenter is present online. That Mailopu actually witnessed the disastrous earthquake in 1898, and he wrote about it, and it was also published by Stresemann. I have it here in this Die Palohi-Sprache. And Stresemann was not interested in it for the historical information that Markus Mailopu provided. He said in the beginning, he says, he's an eyewitness, but it was more interesting for him as a language example. So it's in Palohi, and then Stresemann translated into German just to show off the language, basically. And for us, it's interesting to revisit this and look at it from a different angle to see what information did Markus Mailopu provide that actually made it into the writing of history, of Mailopu history also. So this is now also available in English because it's only there in German now. So this can be seen in the online exhibit. If you go further to Bubu, I'm just browsing through this because you can, if you're interested, you're welcome to view it now later. This is Mailopu's route on Bubu, which we also saw before, because this is, as far as they met at some point on Seram, we don't know quite when. But it's clear that they all went to Bubu together, and Markus Mailopu had a very, very strong impact on this Bubu expedition. It would not have been possible without him. He made the ways, he helped with measuring the sea, for example. They did a lot of surveying work, and he asked people around to help them. There was initially people didn't want to help the expedition, local people. They said we don't want to work with them, and Mailopu somehow, moved them over. And if you go scroll further down, there's two focus stops that I just took, the measuring one of the lakes there, and also climbing Mount Kapalamada, which was very difficult to do, and Markus was actually the first one who hit the top. Then we had his time in Europe as an ex, because after the expedition was done in Mailopu, he actually decided to join them. And from what we know from the records, this was his own decision. So it was not him being forced, or maybe he was invited, but it seemed to be his decision to come to Europe. And he stayed for quite a while, and it's very interesting because in his diaries he kind of gives an ethnographic description of Germany at the time. So he describes what do people do, how do people dress. There's a lot of focus also on the military activity, for example, which was kind of, as Magnus has said, just the interest point at the time. And this is what can be found in here. So you have the diaries as the main sources for this. And some quotes also, if you scroll further down. This is another map where you can see where he actually went. He went to different places, not just Germany. They also went to Switzerland. And for example, this is the first time one of what he mentions quite often in his diaries, the first time that he actually saw snow and that he went skiing. And he also describes this practice of skiing with drawing in his diary. And this is a photo of him actually on the Feldberg mountain, which is close to Freiburg. And moving to his final years, probably, this is something I'm a bit torn, because the archive is called this Markus Mailopu and the Second Freiburg Moluccan Expedition, and now we're moving away from this expedition to another one. But this is where it becomes really fascinating to me, and also to it's a nice connection for Magnus, who's who's mainly studying in Africa. So Mailopu was actually asked to join an expedition to Cameroon, and there was not just asked, but there was a lot of organization to do that. So it was commissioned by the Reichskolonialamt, so the German Imperial Office, because Cameroon is also, that's why it's written like that, it was a German colony, and the Imperial Office wanted some more surveying to be done in the area. And Elbert said, well, I know, he was mentioned before, it was Franco geographer. He said, I know this guy from Seram. He's in Germany right now, he's working with Waktu. He's very good in dissecting birds. This was the reason for him to join. And so they actually made it possible, and Markus Mailopu did join the expedition. And if you move further down, there's some documents from the from the Federal Archives here, showing all the planning. We have also his route that he took on Cameroon. And further down, there's actually the photograph here that shows the expedition, and we put it here. This is the Elbert expedition, not the Freiburg one. Unfortunately, there's not an image like that from the Second Freiburg Moluccan Expedition, but I put it here because it also shows what expeditions actually meant, and it's not just three people heroically climbing mountains and then writing, but there's a lot of people involved without whose it would not be possible to do this. And what is nice now again about the digital archive is that we can move our cursor across here. Of course, if you look at it from the laptop, the quality is a bit better. But on the back side, actually, the wife of Elbert, the expedition leader, she just explained who's doing what what are people doing? This is just a random moment from the expedition life. And here you can see Markus, the Malay, who was called, prepares birds. So this is actually also visual proof of Markus Mailopu being there, because yeah, of course, sometimes things are planned and then it never happens, but here we can actually say he really was there, and he was part of the expedition, just as the others were. And it kind of also shows this moving from meeting Erwin Stresemann and the others in Seram and joining them, slowly getting into working in the scientific environment. In Germany, he also met people at the university. He also did leisure activities, so he was introduced into academic life. And I think it's nice to see this progression, that in the end he was actually hired for his scientific capability to join a very important expedition that unfortunately had a very bad ending, because the war broke out and the expedition had to be ended very abruptly. Everyone just tried to leave, and Markus Mailopu and Dr. Lange, who was another geologist, who's I think mentioned there, but we cannot see him anyways. They were actually asked into the Schutztruppe, so into the military forces. And Lange came back to Germany, but we still don't know what happened to Markus Mailopu. And it's unfortunately very likely that in some time during these war chaotic times, his traces get lost, and we don't have any proof of him traveling back to Maluku, which was the plan actually. After this expedition, he was supposed to go back to Hamburg and then back to Maluku. It was also taken care of. Elbert would pay for it himself actually, but his traces are lost, and I hope to find out more in the Rundfjords Library, hopefully, in Ambon, or maybe the National Archives, because, yeah, I'm pretty sure that there must be a trace somewhere. If a person dies or something happens, usually there's some sort of bureaucracy around it. Yeah, so I'm very, very enthusiastic about being here and doing some more research on that. So please feel free to look at the archive too. There's also a comment function for the certain items. If someone has an idea or says, hey, I know about this, please don't hesitate to contact us. We're really interested in just using this and also making it bigger and useful for research. And now I will hand back over to Magnus for some last final words to connect this to heritage, to progress to the workshop later.
We need to go back to the second part of this one. Oh. Goes on? Yep. Oh. The second part. 1 second. Yep. Exactly. And you can already take the next slide. Peter asked me to have a short comment on the anthropology of heritage, which is a special focus of your work here, and I'm afraid I won't add too much new, but I wanted to give 3 short quotes as a base for more fundamental reflection and to initiate discussion afterwards. Heidi Geismar has written on anthropology quite known and heritage regimes. And she says, heritage is, in everyday parlance, used to refer to the objects, practices, knowledge, and environments that sustain cultural worlds across generations. Within academia, it is an unruly category that spans numerous analytic positions and perspectives, generating new subfields, training programs, and journals, and new intersections with the local, national, and international governments. Heritage, like its older sister, cultural property, is a tangle of ideology and expectation, an analytic term and a tool of governance, a category that allows us to understand the power dynamics involved in the selective recognition of identity, often in material form. It is also a foundational category for political economy, the heritage industry, drawing often exploitatively on languages of value, resource management, production, consumption, and profitability. It is this combination of policy, practice, and philosophy that makes heritage such a powerful signifier of the past, of inheritance, of power, ownership, and of identity. I add what 2 years earlier Sharon MacDonald has said in her book Memory Lands, Heritage and Identity in Europe Today. Indeed, some engagements with the past may entail very little remembering or even memory content at all. This is one reason why I have suggested past presencing as a possibly preferable alternative means of framing investigation. Not only does this allow for consideration of a broader range of phenomena without assuming either intentional recollection of pre-given processes or known actors, it also avoids some of the problematic distinctions of which memory is part, especially that between history and memory. She goes on discussing these fuzzy categories, which we don't have to do, it's enough to say they are fuzzy. Materialized into cultural forms, the resources for cultural memory may remain even when direct transmission of social memory, Jan Assmann calls communicative memory, no longer occurs. Keep that in mind for a moment. Most recently, Yohaini Guldastuti, who will also be a contributor to a book, an edited volume we are preparing on, which is called Relocating. I was not sure if I found the right relocating Maluku. And she has an idea on commons museums. So you have that idea of ownership in mind. She's approaching it from a pedagogical perspective. My conceptualization of the term commons museums is not based on the idea of redeeming the centrality of the museum as a knowledge producer about heritage and futurity. Rather, commons museums are seen as part of developing a vision for doing politics from below, or what Charlotte Hess and Elinor Ostrom have described as shifting away from the idea of knowledge as resource towards the recognition that knowledge is a common, collective, and shared set of practices. Building upon Hess and Ostrom, I regard museums as sites for the discovery and accumulation of practices whose institutional and social parameters need to be reimagined to account for knowledge as commons. To wrap up, very basic. Heritage is claim and construct at the same time, praxis and process. It's made and remade. Its activation may serve, that's always included, potentially contesting political and profit interests, and exposes or disguises political economies of interpretation. Who's able to say what? Anthropology as a discipline, I think, can study past and heritage as phenomena through a phenomenological lens. That means very basically looking at things without too much presuppositions or systematic ideas you might have, categories you might have in mind. Just studying from the viewpoint, looking at, as past presencing, past in the present, and as a practice of culture. Refer to MacDonald. To understand knowledge as commons, that means something which should be accessible, democratic, communicative, socially related, and relating, open for us in his praxis and doings. That has been said by the Dean, of course, before. It's nothing that can be closed and done once forever. In that sense, our attempt to mobilize these somehow silenced and dispersed archival materials is an invitation for dialogue and debate. And that's where I simply want to invite you for dialogue and debate. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Magnus and Luisa, for the very enlightening talk and presentation. I think we have a lot to unpack here. I mean, we have the ideas. First, we have the expedition itself and the attempts to remobilize the archive that is found about the expedition, but also on the anthropology of heritage. I think some of the several last remarks from Magnus is provocative, and I think most of all it invites discussion. I want to ask the audience if anyone already have some kinds of questions or provocation for further discussions with Magnus and Lisa, please. Or probably if there's also in the Zoom channel that wants to participate, please raise your hand, or you can also type in the chat box. Not yet. I mean, it's usually like this in Indonesia. I mean, we need time to to delve and to digest everything, to process. Okay, Raha, friend.
Halo, selamat pagi semua. My name is Raha. I used to study in the history department across the street. And last year I finished my master's in history of science in Manchester. And my thesis was pretty much like this. I researched about the first Indonesian science expedition in the 60s during the Spanish era to the Indonesian Eastern Seas. So that's why this topic is very interesting, because I also like tracing the old ones like, during the Dutch era, and this topic is pretty much unheard, I guess, mostly especially in the English literatures. So it's also interesting when you said that this expedition was like sabotaged by the Dutch government back then, because the contemporaries, like the worst expeditions to the Papua, in his diaries he wrote like the Dutch really like tried to sabotage his expedition because of the, you know, at that time the colonial government, they tried to build some kind of like colonial prestige about science, something like that. So yeah. I wonder why. I mean, that it's pretty much like a historic question, but yeah, I kind of wonder why. Why the expedition kind of like, you can say like smooth, I guess. And also the Markus diary is very interesting and very fresh, because I mean recently the discourses about the decolonization is very like strong here in Indonesia. We tried, especially in the historian circle, where we tried to like put the local people to the front, like Markus. Like a few years ago, we also held like a lot of like discussions where we talk about Ali Wallace, the assistant of the Wallace, and I think if your research can like have like a bigger public exposure, it can become like the second, like become like the second second way of that kind of exposure, I guess. So I think my question was like simple, like why that time like the Dutch government found this expedition useful for them, and also why the expedition itself, what kind of like their attitude toward the Dutch colonial influence, the Dutch colonial government. I mean you kind of like already touched about it, but maybe there are something that you can explain further about it. Thank you very much.
Yeah, now, maybe we'll just stay here for. And yeah, thank you for that comment. That's very it's nice to also see the connections also between the of course this historical or this history approach to these topics and the anthropology one. And I think what this can be do is exactly what you mentioned, to make it bigger, to make it known, to make it public, and also to maybe this is a step that has to be taken, but to try to move away also from these hero figures on any parts. So it's to just so this it's not single people that you have, for example, the one you mentioned for Wallace or James Cook, but it's every single expedition was dependent on people that supported them that were not from Europe. And this is another one, and I'm sure if you look more closely, and this is what I hope that will happen, you will find many more. And this is something that needs to be, and I feel also, if, like you say, it's growing, and it's I think this is something that's becoming more popular to focus in anthropological, but also in historical research, right? With global history, this is something that's is not unknown anymore. And for your question, I think Magnus has already mentioned, maybe you could say more to that, why the Dutch were okay with Germans. I think it's because they had close university ties also, so they also were very close contact with Leiden University, and there was somehow this academic community that was able to move through this colonial competition that was also happening. And as Magnus said, the Dutch colonial administration profited highly from the maps they created, because they published very quickly, so they did a lot of surveying. They also redid some, so there's diary entries where they say, oh, the maps that we have, they're useless, they're not correct, so we have to redo this whole area. And they published them really quickly. Only 1 year afterwards, there's a famous, there was the biggest journal at the time, the Petermanns Geographische Mitteilung, was a German journal for geography, and everything, they also had like really short notes, everything that was done that concerned expeditions or exploring the world was published there, and it was published so quickly that the Dutch administration could actually profit from that. And also areas, for example, Tauern also is also in the online exhibition, went to Misol, which was also not that well surveyed at the time, so he was also able to provide new cartographic material. And I think this is the main reason why the Dutch said, well, if they don't harm us, they won't build their own colony there now. These three Germans, let them have their own. You want to end?
You basically answered the question. We don't really know, but there are a number of suggestions or interpretations. One is these Germans were not that important. They were going to a marginal, at that time already marginal area. The Dutch had other problems. You see, Maluku was not that much in their focus anymore, and they were doing a job they had to do anyhow, and I think geographic measurements were something they could sell or offer. They were not seen as enemies, but as European academics, co-European academics who might be competitors, but not in that case. There was enough space to do research, and the Netherlands were also somehow small, very specialized academically, absolutely European top, but there were not that many people and who could do all the research by themselves. And there were strong European academic networks. So I think they simply tolerated that and welcomed them as co-Europeans who were not nationals clearly, but who were allowed to do research. In the first proposal, I'm not sure if I mentioned that, Deninger does some, he proposes that there could be lessons learned from that research in Dutch-controlled Maluku for German-controlled the Bismarck archipelago in Northern Papua. So that didn't come true in the end, but that was the discourse in the end.
maybe just a tiny thing to add on. I also find it interesting to see how this fact was viewed or to think about, because we don't know, of course, by the local population, because the expedition members actually got clothing from the Dutch military. So when they were moving across Seeram, they actually looked like Dutch military officers. But on the other hand, they were trying to do ethnographic research and complaining about, oh, the Dutch are ruining everything. So it's very, it's a very strange two-sided relationship that they seem to have there, because Magnus has shown the quotes. They say, oh, thank God, here roads, we can drive. The Dutch have prepared everything and they're wearing their clothes. And then on the other hand, they're criticizing that very colonial expansion that they profit from. Otherwise, the expedition wouldn't have been possible. And there's also one remark where I think Schliesemann writes, yeah, we're now trying to get more into the mountain where people don't like the Dutch so much, so now we got rid of all the military, because they also had military people accompanying them. So they got rid of everyone and the clothes and just tried to go on their own, to not be exposed as Dutch or Dutch friendly. Yeah, so that's quite an interesting, weird dynamic that's happening there.
There's one comment where Stresemann says that people wouldn't have talked to us that way if we would have been Dutch. So they also profited from not being Dutch in ethnographic research.
So they took whatever was.
Is it like there are like a mention about the sebuah expedition in your research? Like I mean in the research of this Freiburg expedition, because it happened like 10 years before, right? It was also like one of the major expeditions in the areas.
They knew of each and everyone who had been in the region. They knew which trajectories and which routes they took, which pathways, and what exactly had been studied and published. And this goes even 20, 30 years in the past. However, they had a clear-cut idea what they want to contribute, and they were searching for spheres or areas and aspects that have not been studied, because they needed also to build a career, academic career in Germany. So they were quite strongly insisting of having done something new. So they were well informed on the one hand, on the other, earlier research just appears as, but they didn't do that, or they never went there. So you see that element of collaboration and somehow elitist academic knowledge accessible to all European researchers. At the same time, there is competition and rivalry for own career building. So it's not dominant in their writing, but you find it in the diaries particularly.
Good. Any further comments?
Any further comments?
Thank you very much for really outstanding presentation. I'm Greta. I studied philology, and it is actually my first time to attend a lecture on anthropology. And actually, when I first listened to the lecture, I found it quite similar with some aspects of the study I studied in philology, which is about ERCOT, and so it sparked my interest because my lecturer once told me that to study the one who collects and studied manuscript in Indonesia. Previously, the Dutch and European people were anthropologists, and at that time I didn't really get any clue about the relation of anthropologists and the manuscript, but since now I studied manuscript, I become interested how to bridge the knowledge of being anthropologist when we look into the manuscript collection. Because previously maybe I only look the manuscript as a philologist, but to see it as anthropologist, how should I see it? And because moreover I'm interested when I see the result of the Markus collection, how an anthropologist could present them, and it's more or less similar when a librarian or archaeologist would like to digitalize no, indigenous knowledge. Thanks a lot. Maybe it's a beginner question.
That's a nice question, which I immediately refer. Do you want to? You prepared?
To be honest, there's sometimes I have the feeling that being an anthropologist is also taking away from just focusing on one aspect. So sometimes I feel it's even more useful if there's one clear focus point. If you're a philologist or if you're a historian, for example. I discussed this with a historian from LMU also, who also did his PhD recently, and he was a bit mad at me. Even he said, "Well, there's so many. We have all of the documents because, of course, Markus' diary is not the only one. There's also diaries by Erwin Stresemann and by Deninger and Hauan also." And he didn't understand, like, well, why didn't you look at all of them? Well, why didn't you read them all? Why did you just focus on those and then translate parts and the others you don't? And of course, there's a lot of thinking and just making decisions on what to focus and what trail to choose. And naturally, some things will be left out that might have been interesting that you just cannot cover or that you will not cover. And I think it's most promising or most productive to choose a path that, of course, can be altered. If at some point it comes up something is way more interesting or something is just there and it won't go away, to be flexible with it also, but to widen, not brighten also, but to widen the focus. There was one colleague who said to me, "Well, it seems like you're a digital detective." And then I thought, yeah, that's quite fitting. I do feel like a detective, not just digital. I mean, this is where it starts, and now we're moving there, but. I like that also maybe because I like detective stories. Maybe that's a personal thing, but just trying to get into the story and this is of course one of many approaches, but looking at the relations and the interlocutions between people. This is what our project, it has a very long name, but interlocution is one crucial part of it, and this is something that I find valuable about anthropology, to really look at what relationships and what kind of dynamics actually made things happen. For example, this expedition, and focusing also on the gaps, which is of course more common now to see what do I not see in this. You know, what is missing from this. For example, in the diaries by Erwin Stresemann, you could look at this from a gender perspective. There's nothing about women except that they're beautiful or that they're ugly. That's it. And of course, this is also something that needs to be looked at. It's not. I cannot do this also in my project. I hope someone else will take it up. But there are many gaps to be filled, or just to be not necessarily filled, but detected. To say this is something that is missing. The text is also in between the lines, right? What is not there? I'm not sure if I answered the question. But maybe we can talk later. Do you want to add something?
Yeah. Just shortly. I really like the question because for my master's I studied literature, so I love stories and texts. But I think Luisa responded well. There is literally nothing that anthropology couldn't examine, or you could not examine from an anthropological point of view. You will always need the knowledge of various disciplines, and you will always respect these and make use of them, but you're not stuck to them. And so that's the creative part of anthropology, which I did not always see in literature studies. You're less bound to something. It's more creative in a way, if you are ready to also dare to do that.
berdua dari
Thank you, Magnus, Luisa, for your presentation. My name is Raihan. I'm finished my master's in Monash University, Ethnomusicology. So it's actually related to my relationships, also in the knowledge as well. I'm curious, especially in the archive, especially in the musics, and also with the recordings, whether are there any recordings that we can look it up into, because I believe in the past, in the 30s, all the recorders actually quite hard to maintain. For example, the Niagara one is quite expensive at that time and also quite not quite resistant in humidity. So are there any recordings that we can look it up, especially for the Markus, especially expeditions and stuff? So, and the second one, I think that'll be great for us as well to, are there any like development in the future, for example, the development in the future of the archive and the website, because I believe when I was in Monash as well, there was one called Music Archive Monash University, where we have a lot of Indonesian documents, also recordings, and being archived and transcribed and translated into the Indonesian and English, so they'll be expanding and like expandable in the future, maybe. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Yeah, exciting. There's so many points to connect also to other archives, which is something I'm really interested in. At the same time, it becomes a lot, and if you're alone with, of course, two other people and 3 other people in the project, there's a lot of opportunities at some point. But the sound recording is something that I'm really excited to do here. So I do have sound recordings that Olaf Tauern made. They were sent to me by the museum in Berlin. They have a phonographic archive, so it's an archive just for sound recordings, and this is actually one of them. And I don't know if it's similar, maybe some of you have worked in museums also in Indonesia, and we can, of course, modestly discuss, but in Germany it's sometimes surprising how the museum archives are organized, and sometimes I expect a bit, I expect things to be done and to be, thoroughly done, and, people know where things are, but often that's not the case, because there's just so much things that were accumulated, especially in ethnographic collections, also natural history. These archives are just so full, and people are just people that can do so much they can do, so oftentimes they're also surprised to find new things. So there were museums where I knew something should be there, and they're like, no, I'm sure we don't have it. And I said, can we look into this one more cupboard maybe? I said, yeah, you can look if you want. And it was there. So there were instances where actually just, pushing and trying to find out more is very useful. And in the case of the sound recordings, the quality is, as you said, very bad. So there's a lot of background noises, and of course, reusing it gets worse and worse. So the wax,
The tape, yeah.
wax, yeah, thank you. It just gets worn down, and they made two sets of recordings, so we have them. But the museum, as it is not ours to decide, so they were sent to us to assess, and also they need to do some redoing of the list, because it's wrong in some instances. But they asked us not to publish anything, because the museum has a policy that these sound recordings, if they're not published yet, they need to be verified by the community, whoever that is. So there will be some people, I don't know what the verification is to say that people are from the community. This is also something that's sometimes very difficult, but this is why I'm also here to go to Ammon and talk with colleagues if this is something that can be shown. So there's mainly songs, speech samples also, so if people give talks or lectures or prayers, for example. So some of them are also connected to the Kagyan Society, which of course is sacred, so I don't know if these should exist at all, these recordings. And as soon as that's decided. I hope that there will be some that we will be able to put into the Mailopu Archive. And who knows, maybe in the future, if there's other archives that, that collect, I mean, then it will be there and shareable and transferable. So if something like that happened, I mean, this would be the ideal outcome, right? If this is not useful just for this, but others. And generally, development, there will be an ongoing, it will grow. There's now kind of where we kind of stuck a bit because we're waiting from a really big part to come from Frankfurt. Because the Frankfurt Museum actually has the largest collection of Seeram, I think, in the whole of Europe even, or at least Germany, so they have a lot, because they also have the Magnus expedition there, and they have around 300 artifacts from the second Freiburg Moluccan Expedition, and because they don't have a digital archive of their own, they said, well, this is amazing, if you could just take all of them. So then we can say this part of our collection is online via the Mailopu Archive, and this is what we're working on now, or they're working on. And then there will be the whole Seeram collection from this expedition available in the Mailopu Archive. So this should happen in the next month, let's say. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you for the opportunities. Let me introduce myself. My name is Rosmo. Before I studied in history, I studied here in Magister of Anthropology, and I know it's so challenging when you collect the archive. So the question is, do your team face the challenges like when you collect the people archive? I mean, like oral history, because you know, in history, when we do the historiography, it's very complex inquiries when we collect about the oral history. Do you consult with historians or something, and how the dynamics, or when you talk about that? Thank you.
I'll try. We didn't have that much oral history as a methodological aspect in that project, because we had written sources and then we slowly extended, and now meeting people who might contribute themselves is just coming up and will be part of Luisa's research. Generally speaking, and that's also a good thing about anthropology, you don't have to understand oral history as having to fit into written history done by historiography. It's more about storytelling, and you interrelate, and you also allow contestation, you allow difference, you allow, because as we said, the past is now, somehow. When we make use of past or refer to past, it's always in the present. So these are political statements also, and that is something we can try to reflect, map out, also allow people to have said something which then cannot be further researched or commented, but it stands there and we will present it. So we are a bit, I think we are allowed to step a bit back, other than historiography, which might feel obliged to know the truth. And so we can leave it as at a dispute level, for example, contesting views. That's fine, and you can comment on that. And I would keep it also with that, with oral history, particularly if you know there's history is contested. Then it's not a good starting point to come as an outsider wanting to resolve who's right and who's
wrong. This is, for example, one of the moments where I wish I had maybe studied history first and then anthropology. I think that's, I mean, you can probably say more about that, but it sounds like a very good combination of skills to tackle, especially archival approaches or museum work. Because I studied history for a very brief 2 semesters, I think. Well, that was more formally, to be honest, to maintain the student status. But although I learned a lot about global history, so it was good. But of course, the methodology I didn't learn in that depth as I would have in in a proper history program. And now going to Anwalt, of course, I'm also curious and a bit nervous, because there are still descendants from Markus Mailopu, so he himself, as far as we know, did not have any children. I mean, he left as a young man and never came back, but his brother, so there's actually his brother's, how do you say, his brother's grandchild, exactly, who actually reached out to us, so there are still descendants from Markus Mailopu, and it will be a challenge for me to do that, and I will try to record oral history. Also, I know that there are colleagues there who've worked on that, so I'm not that alone. And maybe also Gega can give me some mentoring hints. But this is definitely something that will become interesting now for us. That's really. But the project was designed to recollect the material that we have first, and then talk about is that interesting to anyone else? What can we do with that? Because not coming with empty hands doesn't make much sense, right? We need a base to talk about something. So we'll see how that goes. Thank you for your question.
We should shift to the Zoom channel, and this is from Vincent Rumaloy. He's an artist now settled in Bandung, but he's from Serang.
Okay, that's very. I can just read it so everyone can hear. So Vincent asks, can Markus Mailopu be considered an anthropologist? If you look at the significant roles in the research, are there any findings from his archives, not only from his field trip to Serang, about a specific ethnography method approach that is not similar to the approach by the Germans? Thank you for that very great question. You want to start?
Has he been an anthropologist? That's up to interpretation, and you might find pros and cons. Certainly, he has been an ethnographer, as he used his own personal impressions in Germany. That the diaries have been written in Germany after the expedition, and there as an ethnographer, he wrote down impressions of daily life he had and personal experiences. You know, the diary is pre-academic genre, text genre. You put in whatever comes through. In the evening, you sit there, you note down what has happened during the day. It's full of emotions, it's chaotic. The only ordering structure is chronology. It was today. So this is something we consider to be a resource for later reflection. To go through your own diaries or through someone else's diaries of a certain time. So in that sense, he fully fills the category. What he did was ethnographic work, not different from any other person's work. I would personally see that. Was it anthropological? If you want to see that as anthropology, yes, why not? But I don't think personally this was his main interest. His academic interest was to some extent linguistic, as he was doing quite solid linguistic work, collaborating with Erwin Stresemann on grammar and vocabulary and mythology of Paulohi. So that could be termed academic in the sense of the time, though he was as a student in a missionary school. He could read and write, but he had not gone through a university, of course. And he had very practical knowledge on taxidermy. So if you want to call that an entrance into natural science, yes, also he was competent in that. He had definitely developed skills. Still, you have to see that what the privileges the European had and Markus, though he might have come from a privileged family in Seram, he never went to university. And what we think anthropology might be today is certainly different of what anthropology has been then. So this is somehow an open question, which I would leave up to you to answer. He was born on Seram and went to missionary school there, so we don't know exactly when he met the expedition, and he becomes visible in the texts during their stay on Buru Island, not before, so I can't say much on his ethnographic perspective on Seram. In Buru, I think he appears as an intermediary. He starts to see the world from two perspectives. Locals who do not want to cooperate, and the expedition which has some aims, some goals to fulfill, and they want to get this done, and so he becomes also somehow pragmatic and mediating these two positions. And that's in a way also anthropological, if you want to say so.
Yeah, maybe to add to the second half of your question, which I find very intriguing, his approach. It is actually interesting to, I mean, in other diaries there you can of course read and then decide for yourself. But the way that Markus Mailopu describes his encounters with German institutions, for example, is also very rewarding from a German university perspective, because he introduces people that were not considered part of the academic staff at the time. So, for example, the geological department in Freiburg had, of course, many people that were taking care of the tools that were used. There was a guy who was just there to sharpen the equipment that was used, for example, or that organized the expeditions. And these are actually the people that Markus Mailopu introduces by name, not the other ones. The other ones are just Tuan Professor, so he just says there are 4 Tuan Professors, and there's Mr. Lörger, who takes care of the tools. So from looking at the history of the University of Freiburg, for example, you cannot find Mr. Lörger. He's not visible because he was not important enough to be listed as making history in this university. But of course, he was part of the system. Otherwise, it wouldn't have worked. And it's very weird also to see that we learned part of our German university history through Markus Mailopu, who came a really long way. And I was able to find some registration from this gentleman who was working there, but otherwise, yeah, no traces. So yeah, of course, there was a different approach. The way he describes is rather classic ethnographic, I would say. Maybe they also, I don't know what people read in missionary schools. Maybe there's also similar texts that have been written to. Or read, or this was made by training from Erich Stresemann, but there's definitely kind of a different focus point that can be seen in certain areas. Thank you for that question. Yeah.
So you know, German universities are still quite hierarchical, but at that time, pretty much. So clear-cut classes and sections, no intersection. And Markus was brought by privileged people, combining academic, business and military positions and the milieus, bourgeois milieu, and he was protected, he was a protégé. But that does not mean that he was accepted by everyone. He didn't have access to all professors and all these kinds of representatives of elitist Germany at that time. So he probably had just quite a simple access to people, technical stuff, and people with whom he could chat on a eye level. who accepted him, and that didn't happen automatically. And that's reflected in his writings, in his diaries. That also means he never has had access to the German academic system. He could not become an academic in Germany at that time. It was unthinkable. So one way out was, of course, to join then the Moluccan Expedition. And again, to get a job, doing something, being respected for what you do, all that. He was probably handed around and introduced to various bourgeois circles. It was treated like somehow exotic, nice, but he was not part of that society. Couldn't be at that time.
Okay. Mas Ali. Thank you. I'm interested with your title, Entangled Heritage. I'm just curious about how all of kind of archive have the interaction with the community in some place in Markus Expedition today. Maybe in other words, how heritage is discussed diachronically. Maybe how Maluku community memorize their past, their identity, their history, or maybe their richness of their art from the archive of Markus in his expedition. Because, for example, in my case, research, I researched about the woven textile in Sumba, and the people I studied in Sumba, they are textile weaver. They reproduce the old textile from the old picture that they got from the museum in Europe, and maybe from the collector, and they reproduce the textile. And yeah, because as we know that Eastern Indonesia community is more strong in oral tradition than writing tradition. So I just want to know how the people in some place in Markus Expedition have the interaction with this kind of archive. Thank you.
I don't know yet. This is why I'm here. So we built the archive, and there's of course some colleagues, for example, Zulu we will meet, who already were, for example, interested in especially the Palohi language, because it's quite similar to some other local languages that are still spoken. So there's an interest in using this archive to add to oral history collections that are being done by Zul and the Kora Maluku initiative, for example, which is an organization that formed between different members of different universities. But how people actually we had 2 years ago, at the beginning of our project, we had an online event also with Universitas in Ambon, and there were a lot of people joining, also not just from the area, but also from around I don't know, US or whatever. But of course, for us, it was most interesting to see what people actually from Ambon have to say, and there was quite a discussion. Of course, this was not people from the different parts where they went through Ambon, but this was not their main idea. So what people from Amahai, from Palohi, from Wahai say, I will hopefully find out when I go there. So I also hope to go to Seram and speak to people. What I know from this granddaughter, niece, is that she was very aware of the fact that she's a descendant from Markus Mailopu. So I think, and there was also documents that she shared with us. So it seems that there is some recognition about this, but I think it's very much focused on the Black family history and not in a broader sense. And at the university, when we had the meeting at the university, the discussion point very quickly turned towards religion, because we are very sure that Markus Mailopu was Christian, because it's mentioned in several instances, and he spoke Malay, he could write Latin, so it's quite obvious to us that he was Christian, although we don't have he doesn't say I'm a Christian, so maybe there will also be some sort of proof in the missionary archive that he was registered there. But there was very quickly the question, couldn't he also be Muslim? Why are we so sure that he's a Christian? So it was surprising for me, because this was nothing I had thought about, which is of course the ignorance that comes with when you're an outsider, just thinking of this, supposing what are the possible talking points, and then when you actually get to talking, you realize something completely different is of interest. And that was in this case mainly the question of religion, which is in Ambon and Maluku, of course, still a very prominent issue. So I hope after I can write you when I'm when I've been there. I'll send you an email, maybe with more information.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks so much. Good morning. My name is Arkan. I'm currently kind of different with the others around here because I'm a third semester student. These are still a Bachelor of English Literature. So, however, I do have a specific focus and a specific interest in the anthropological, especially language preservation. So the thing that I want to discuss, or I would like to ask, is like, how do you see yourself in a research project by approaching your research using the Alifu and Paologi language? How do you may use your project research could be one of the preservation of the language itself? Because we know that the language itself are indigenous and they are being endangered. And how do you, or maybe Markus or maybe Sturgeon, to having the language better for understanding more with the context of the Moluccans people there, Moluccans tribe over there. So what do you see about that? Or maybe you could be using that as an advance further project research in the future. So what do you say about the preservation language of the Alifu and Paologi? Thank you.
Thank you for that question. I'm still not sure how the situation concerning Paologi is in Maluku. I think maybe Giga knows more about that. Of course, there's also I forgot the name now, the official institute that collects indigenous languages. So I think it is part of that. I have to look that up again. I forgot the name. But in the beginning, I thought, oh, that's great. Then they can just translate the text, so maybe we can find a way to cooperate. But it is really more of a collection, as in collecting vocabulary and grammar. But that, of course, doesn't mean that anyone at the institute speaks the languages. It makes sense, of course, because there are so many languages on Seram. But what I hope to find out also with Koa Maluku, hopefully, when we go there, is that in the book that I also previously held up, the Paologi-Sprache by Erwin Stresemann, there is actually also a vocabulary list in the back, for example, and I also used it to try to grasp some of these, and it went okay. So I think it is usable. And I'm not sure how much it's been used by colleagues in Maluku. So maybe this is something, because of course it's German and Paologi. It might be a bit difficult to use, and also the grammar, but maybe this is something where also we can assist or contribute to just providing information, or also, I mean, this is now online there to use to to support whatever efforts are made. But of course, this is not our. I'm not coming from Germany and saying you have to preserve your language. I'll do this. This is not my job to do, or my wish. But if there's efforts I will see when I go there. I have the feeling that there is some work being done already, and I'm looking forward to see what might come out of the collaboration.
The good thing about anthropology, as much as in general, as much as an online archive in particular, is we don't have to do each and everything. So it's there, and it should be used, and it should be a base for drag in many interests. So there have to be now experts or experts to be who make use of that material and do their own work with that. We had a 3-year project, which is now in the final year. So, and we're not regional experts. We did what we could, you see, but it's an invitation. Now, bring in others, spread the word, make use of that. And we would, of course, be very happy to see also the online archive grow and networks growing with people referring to it and say, well, I found something which is usable for my own research interests and I want to go further. And then I also give feedback and say, well, look up here or there, or I wrote that article or discussed with those people. That would be great. That's what we want to achieve.
Do we have any more questions? Or we can also continue with the participant of the workshop after the lunch, because we will move after this to Gedung, right, Mas Arif? Probably one last question from me is, firstly I want to remark that one of the beauty of anthropology is we are trying to make sense something different by looking upon the stories of the humans involved in these whole affairs. And I'm just curious, I mean, I think this is something that you have already mentioned in the previous workshop, but I'm curious and I want you to highlight more into the motives of these early initiators of the expedition, because I think I feel I'm like Raha. I'm always curious about the motivations of people who are doing the expeditions, because we're just curious why they do this in the first place, why they went to the areas that they can define as frontiers. What's the end important, what's the benefit important? But when we are looking upon our stories ourselves as anthropologists, right now there's in Indonesia expeditions to frontiers areas that wants to be developed by the countries, by the state and the government. Probably it's not that different at all, but I'm just curious, and I would ask you to highlight more into the motives of these early initiators of Freiburg second expedition.
It's me. I'm condemned to find an answer to very general questions here.
Yeah.
There's a nice, or I think it's the first entrance or diary entrance we have of Erwin Stresemann, 20-year-old student at Munich University, who gets informed by a friend sitting next to him in a lecture that this friend refrained from joining that planned expedition. And Erwin immediately finds out who was the one initiating, and he writes a letter, very uncommon. You could not easily break this kind of moral social rules. He writes to an older scholar and says, "Excuse myself, apologies for writing you. I know that is not how I should express my respect to you, but I want to be part of that expedition. Please accept me, I'm just a student." And he connects it with, later on he says, a young man should be able to be an adventurer and risk his life for something still to come. So if you think with Bourdieu, he's taking a credit, he's offered a credit and he's making use of that. Now you have to risk what you have, and he's in a privileged position. His father is a pharmacist. He's paying, I think, 8,000 Reichsmark at that time, a lot of money for him to be able to take part. So he's risking something, but he knows he will build a career with that. So on the one hand, there's he's very eager, curious, motivated to do science, but he knows also that this has to be connected with the career. And there's, in the life of Erwin Stresemann, who's the one who lives the longest, there's a lot of ego. You can sense that, and what we have are biographical notes and essays on him by his own former students, and they all say he loved being seen and being admired and all that. And the founding stones for that he laid by really strongly advertising himself as a possible participant there. And another reference in his diary is when they approach or when they reach Bali, then in their own ship called Freiburg, which has another breakdown, and they are washed ashore Bali, and everyone is taking care of the ship, and he's sneaking up the coastline, and he expects to see tigers and whatever, and then there's a street, and someone comes in a horse car and takes him to the residence office or the next mayor's office, and they call by phone the resident. And so he's amazed about the technical infrastructure of Bali at that time, while he expected tigers. And there's also one part he tries to find tigers and shoot one. That would have been great. So there's a lot of romance and curiosity for exotic worlds and for becoming a hero, but it's also connected to pragmatic needs to, if you want to become someone in academia, you have to build on a career, and becoming a hero somehow is connected to that very much. So I also see a young man, to be honest, getting the one chance to go into the world, but already from a privileged perspective, and of course from a kid of his child of his own kinds. So of course he was thinking in hierarchies, of course he was very aware of being European. He was very proud to be German, and this is a time where national pride is slowly growing into proto-fascism and then fascism, so it's not unproblematic. But it's somehow still a young man wanting to see the world. The others might have been bit more realistic about it. And also interested in testing technology like film, sound, also finding, maybe thinking more in terms of resources, funding, being a bit more realistic attached to their age.
Yeah, I had a point, but now went away, I think. Yeah.
But also they built bridges, like Tauern, who had this fascination for alpinism. He took a lot of his imagination and also his skills and knowledge to Ceram. And there's a lot of comparison he makes up. So it's all knowledge or learning, I think, is very much connected to what we already believe to know. And so it was, of course, exotic somewhere else on the other part of the globe. At the same time, there was a lot they believed to know which they could apply to new impressions and new environments. Therefore, I think they felt quite stable to fill up what they already knew. And a hierarchy of culture belongs to that pre-knowledge as much as an idea of a systematic natural history and all kinds of birds, groups and family descent and whatever. Therefore, they had some quite fixed knowledge that they are from an advanced stage of science, applying that to an unresearched area, which they needed to get back and become Salone da Famiglia.
You said it all. Maybe just to add this nationalist notion that you said also maybe for Karl Leninger, you could say that it could, I mean, this is now getting into, in German we say kitchen psychology, but when you, yes, it's not, I'm not a psychologist, of course, but that is this need to somehow serve the country. He was very eager as soon as the war broke out to, he was the first that, was part of the military, and there's also letters where they really strongly show their enthusiasm to actually go to war. So I feel this is just a drive to support the country, their nation maybe also, and connected to their expedition. Also, it was just a huge adventure for them. When the passages where they talk about going with their own boat, it's really crazy. There's a lot of storms and it breaks down. They don't have any more water. Of course, what do they drink? Wine is the only thing that is left. This is also a part that often becomes a bit silenced during these expeditions. Of course, you couldn't carry a lot of water, so what people drank was alcoholic beverages. And I don't know, if I imagine three young guys going on a trip together on a boat with just a barrel of wine, that also maybe changes the mood a bit. And there was very, very adventurous. Spitzmann almost died at one point because the boat was just almost sank. And I think for them, I mean, at some point they had to say, okay, this is really not working. Then they also put wrong fuel in it, and everything went downhill. But until then, it was just a huge adventure. Also, because there was a ship going, they wouldn't have needed to make their own boat. It's crazy. Why would you do that? I think there was a huge part of just having a great adventure and mobilizing that later into a career, or having also something to tell. There were a lot of stories. I spoke to the stepdaughter of Erwin Stresemann, who also remembers it well. She's also an ornithologist, so stayed in the family. And there were a lot of stories told from that expedition.
I think we're already on 11:30, so I think we should end this session now. So please applause. I think we will have another session by 1, I think, by 1, and we are moving to Gedung to each building, so we're moving there. We will not be here anymore, and we'll have a prior break until 1. We should just assemble there.
All right.
Okay. Thank you.